My name is Captain Viraj Solanki, and on February 17th, 2025, I died 38,000 feet above the Earth. I was piloting Flight 619, a routine domestic route from Hyderabad to Kolkata. On board were 132 souls, families, business travelers, honeymooners. I'd flown this route countless times, but that morning carried a silence I couldn't explain. The sky was unusually calm, like something sacred was holding its breath. As we ascended past 30,000 feet, I felt a strange pressure, not in the cabin, but in my chest. Not fear exactly, but an awareness, like someone was watching from beyond the clouds. I glanced at my co-pilot, Dev, who was flipping through our altitude data. I nearly said something, but stopped myself. Pilots don't spook each other. By 9:21 a.m., things went from strange to terrifying. First, the radio cut out. A sudden burst of static. Then a total communication blackout. Then the turbulence, violent, erratic. Instruments began blinking. Warning lights. Altitude indicators losing sync. Dev and I went into emergency protocol, scrambling to stabilize, but it was no use. The controls jerked wildly. It was as if something had seized the plane. We were going down. In those final seconds, I saw the world tilt in slow motion. My fingers tightened around the yoke. My thoughts scattered. Mira, my wife. Anaya, my daughter. The faces of the passengers I was responsible for. Then nothing, not metal ripping, not screams, just silence, and then I was above the wreckage. I had no body, but I could see. The plane below was twisted wreckage. Fire, smoke, emergency crews rushing in, but none of it touched me. I saw myself, my body, still strapped to captain's seat, slumped forward, eyes wide open, lifeless. But I didn't feel fear. I felt peace. I was no longer in time, no longer in pain, no longer bound by gravity or flesh. And then it came, the light, not light like sunlight or electricity. This light was alive, golden, timeless, endless, and from it stepped a figure more real than reality itself. Jesus. I knew him instantly, not from religion or temple or book. My soul remembered him, as if he had written my name into existence. He looked at me with eyes that saw everything I was, and still loved me. I collapsed before him, though I had no legs. He didn't speak out loud. His words flowed directly into my soul. This was not an accident, Viraj. I wanted to scream, to weep, to ask 1,000 questions. But then the sky around us folded open, like a veil being lifted, and Jesus continued. The world no longer listens to the quiet voice of God, so now I must speak through fire. At once, the realm around us shifted. I was no longer hovering above India. I stood beside him in a place of light and vision, and before me, 3 scenes began to form. Visions, each one clearer than the last. And with them came the understanding. This crash was not about metal or engines or human failure. It was a message, and I was being sent back to deliver it. Jesus did not move, yet everything around him did. It was as if creation itself obeyed his stillness. His presence emanated light, but not the kind that hurt your eyes, It bathed my soul. It revealed my soul. I could see everything I had ever done, every moment of pride, every hidden thought, every time I had walked past someone in need. And yet, he did not accuse me. He invited me into something deeper, into truth. Then the first vision opened before us. It looked like Earth, but I knew it wasn't just geography. It was humanity. I saw continents outlined in dim gold light, like spiritual energy pulsing beneath the surface. But over it all was a gray fog, thick and sticky, like a spiritual smog. It wasn't pollution in the physical sense. It was despair, anxiety, apathy. I asked Jesus, "What is this?" His voice moved like wind through water. Spiritual turbulence. I didn't understand at first, but he showed me more. I saw cities, London, Delhi, New York, Lagos, Sao Paulo. People everywhere were rushing, addicted to movement, but completely disconnected. Their ears were stuffed with noise, opinions, media, distractions, and their hearts were hardened not by cruelty but by weariness. Even those who claimed to believe in God were sleepwalking through life. And in the midst of this chaos, I saw believers trying to rise in prayer, only to be dragged down by distractions, habits, and spiritual confusion. Some fell asleep mid-prayer. Others never opened their mouths at all. Jesus turned to me and said, "This is the first sign. Before the darkness comes, the enemy releases a wave of distraction to dull the spirit. It looks like busyness. It sounds like logic, but it numbs the soul." I saw families that once prayed together now sitting in silence, each person on a separate screen. I saw churches bustling with programs but empty of repentance. I saw spiritual leaders drowning in ambition, performing on platforms but ignoring the presence of God. Then Jesus reached toward the earth. A ripple of fire extended from his hand, and everywhere it touched, people began to weep. They dropped their phones. They knelt on sidewalks. Businessmen in glass towers collapsed in prayer. Children raised their hands and sang worship with tears in their eyes. There will be a remnant, he said, a few who will recognize the turbulence for what it is. The first shaking. He paused, and for a moment, the vision dimmed. I asked, "Lord, why me?" He looked at me, through me, and said, "Because you died in the sky, and the sky will shake again. I need a voice that knows the wind." I couldn't comprehend it fully, but I felt it. This was not about being chosen because I was good. I was chosen because I had seen death, and now I must warn the living. The scene shifted again. Jesus raised his hand, and the fog over the earth began to swirl like a cyclone, forming the shape of an enormous eye. It was as if the world itself was being watched by a great force. They will say it is political. They will say it is economic. But it is spiritual. He spoke, his voice more thunder than whisper now. The nations will tremble because they forgot how to kneel. And then the vision ended. I was breathless, though I had no lungs. I looked at him, overwhelmed, and he spoke again. "There are two more signs, Viraj. What you've seen is only the first." I felt it then, the weight of the message, the grief of God, the urgency of heaven, and somewhere deep within me, I knew if people didn't wake up soon, the next signs would not just shake their souls. They would shake the earth itself. When the first vision faded, I found myself standing with Jesus upon what looked like a high mountain, though no terrain around us was familiar. The ground shimmered beneath my feet like polished glass, but the sky above was fractured like a cracked mirror. I could see shards of reality, glimpses of nations, conversations, media clips, pulpits, battlefields, all scattered across the atmosphere like broken windows. Jesus raised his hand again, and the shards aligned into one massive image. I saw voices, millions of them, some preaching, some debating, some mocking, some weeping. They filled the air like thunderclouds. Podcasters, pastors, politicians, teachers, celebrities, TikTokers. Each voice carved into the soul of someone listening. But there was no harmony, just endless clamor, arguments disguised as truth, truth diluted into opinion, opinion worshipped like revelation. I asked, what am I seeing? Jesus looked into the image and said softly, this is the second sign before the darkness comes, the cracking of voices. He explained that the world would enter a season of confusion. People would begin to distrust every voice, even the ones they once revered, not because the truth had changed, but because their ears had grown sick. So many voices would rise at once that people would lose the ability to discern which ones carried the breath of the Spirit. I saw churches tearing themselves apart, not because of heresy, but because of suspicion. I saw Christians turning on each other, not because of persecution, but because of pride. I saw families splitting over online prophets. I saw believers running from one word to another like spiritual addicts, always chasing the next sign, but never returning to the feet of Jesus. Then Jesus said something that struck like lightning. They will call confusion discernment. They will call division purity. And they will miss me standing in silence, waiting for their surrender. I trembled because I knew he was right. Even in my short life, I had seen the hunger for spectacle. People wanted miracles, but not obedience. They wanted signs, but not sanctification. They wanted to follow Jesus until he told them to die to self. Then he showed me something terrifying. I saw a great stage, larger than any stadium on earth. A preacher stood at the center, bathed in golden light. Thousands cheered. But when Jesus pulled back the curtain, I saw the preacher's words were hollow, and demons danced behind him. No one noticed. They were hypnotized by charisma, not the cross. This is the hour of seductive voices. Jesus said, if they do not learn to hear mine above the noise, the darkness will consume them. Not because I wasn't speaking, but because they no longer recognized my tone. I fell to my knees. I cried, Lord, how will they know it's you? He bent down and touched my heart, not physically, but like his hand passed through my soul. And he whispered, my sheep know my voice, not because they studied it, but because they walk with me in silence. Tell them, return to the secret place. Turn off the noise. Come back to my feet. Then, as if a great wind passed through all creation, the mountain began to tremble. The vision collapsed. The shards of voices scattered into darkness. And I stood once again in the realm between realms. Jesus stood beside me. 2 signs have been shown. The final one will come suddenly. few will be ready for it. My chest ached, not from fear, but from grief. I could feel the sorrow of heaven. Not that God was angry, but that so many were distracted, so many were asleep, and time was growing short. Are you willing to carry this, Viraj? He asked. I nodded, though my soul trembled. How could I refuse the one who saved me even in death? Then Jesus said, Come, there's one more sign to show you before the darkness falls. Jesus, and I stood at the edge of what felt like the end of time. There was no sky anymore, only a gray horizon that looked like it was holding its breath. He didn't speak for a while. The silence around us was so still that I could hear my own heartbeat echo like a drum in a vast canyon. Then, without warning, the ground beneath us shifted, not violently, but deliberately, as if it was turning a page in a divine book. We were now standing in the middle of a quiet neighborhood. It looked familiar, like somewhere I'd seen in India or maybe in a dream version of the West. Simple homes, some with gates, others made of wood, clay, or cement. The sun hung low, casting long shadows over rooftops and windows. Jesus turned to me, his voice low and resolute. This is a third and final sign before the days of darkness begin. The sealing of homes. He walked forward and I followed. As we passed each house, I saw something strange. Some homes were glowing with a faint golden light around the doors and windows, like they had been marked from above. Others looked normal on the outside, but when I peeked through the windows, the insides were chaotic. People arguing, screens blaring, children weeping, or worse, silence. Cold, spiritual silence. I looked at Jesus and he explained, Before the darkness falls, I will send my spirit to mark the homes of those who are surrendered, not just believers, but those who live according to my voice. These are the houses that will be protected, not from death, but from despair. He brought me to one particular home, a small hut on the edge of the neighborhood. There, a woman sat on the floor, reading a Bible in silence, her eyes wet with tears. Her children were asleep nearby. I noticed a glow around her doorway, brighter than the rest. This woman, Jesus said, has nothing the world values, but she has me. Her home is sealed. He took me to another house, massive, lavish, full of wealth and entertainment. But inside, I saw spiritual decay. There were crosses on the walls, Bibles on coffee tables, but no prayer, no peace, no presence. Just religion and routine. There was no glow around the home. Nothing. This family attends church, sings my name, and posts scriptures online, he said. But their hearts are far from me. Their home is not sealed. I saw visions of other homes, some in cities, others in slums, some marked, some not. And then I saw what came after the sealing. Darkness began creeping across the landscape, not like night, but like a thick, living shadow. It slithered along streets and alleyways like a black fog. But when it reached the homes that were sealed, it stopped, not by force, but by authority. The darkness was not allowed to enter. I trembled. This was the beginning of the 3 days of darkness. I asked Jesus, what happens to the homes that are not sealed? His eyes saddened, But he didn't look away. Some will cry out too late. Some will curse me. Others will be given over to deception, believing that the darkness is light. But for the faithful, for those who prepare their hearts, I will cover them. I will dwell within their homes. They will not fear. I felt the urgency in his words, not panic, but divine seriousness. This wasn't superstition. This wasn't metaphor. This was a spiritual reality. He was giving his children time to get their houses in order. Then he reached toward me and placed his hand on my chest again. I felt heat surge through my spirit as if fire was being written into my soul. Tell them, Viraj, tell them this is not about religion. This is about intimacy. The seal homes are the ones that know me, not just my name, but my voice. He showed me families gathered in prayer, even if small or weak in faith. He showed me people fasting, singing, and repenting. He showed me believers repenting not just for personal sins, but for the apathy in the church. These were the ones preparing. He then raised his voice, not loud, but like thunder inside my bones. Let every home prepare. Let every lamp be filled with oil. Let every heart return to me. The time of signs is almost over. The moment is coming when the sky will close, and I will not be silent any longer. Then, suddenly, we were back at the edge of that spiritual realm. He said, "You have now seen the 3 signs: the withdrawal of light, the cracking of voices, and the sealing of homes. The darkness is near. The trumpet will not sound for those asleep in comfort, but for those awake in surrender." I stood still, frozen in spirit. I could feel the heaviness of this revelation. It wasn't fear. It was a weight of responsibility. Then Jesus looked at me once more and asked, "Will you carry this warning to my people?" Tears fell from my eyes, and I whispered, "Yes." The moment I said yes to Jesus, I felt a shift. The radiant realm we had been walking through began to blur around the edges. I was no longer just standing in heaven. I was being pulled back, as if gravity had suddenly remembered I existed. But something else began happening too. Something dark. As I descended, my spirit hovered over what felt like a battlefield. It wasn't the same as the chaos I had witnessed in the visions. This was personal. I was between heaven and earth, between life and death. But it was as if something was trying to stop me from returning. I could feel invisible hands clawing at me, pulling, resisting, snarling in a language I didn't understand. Demonic, feral, furious. They knew I had seen something holy. They knew I carried a warning. And they did not want to speak. I cried out, "Jesus, they're pulling me back." But his voice came again, calm and fierce. "They cannot stop my word. You carry not your own breath, but mine. Speak when you wake." That's when I felt it, a sudden slam of pressure and heat, as my soul was forced back into my body. I gasped violently as machines beeped around me. Nurses screamed. My chest burned. A mask was pulled over my face. "He's back!" someone shouted in Hindi. I was alive, but everything was different. The days that followed were strange. I lay in my hospital bed, barely able to move, but my spirit was on fire. The images I saw of the dark cloud, the sealed homes, the cracking voices, they burned behind my eyes. I couldn't sleep, not because of pain, but because I knew time was running out. But here's what I didn't expect. When I tried to speak about what I saw, almost no one believed me. My father wept with joy that I had come back to life. But when I said, Jesus showed me the 3 signs for the 3 days of darkness, he stiffened. His eyes hardened. He said quietly, "We are not Christian, Viraj. Don't say these things." Even my doctor, who had once called me a miracle, warned me gently. "You were hallucinating. It's the trauma." But I knew. I had never felt anything more real in my life. I tried writing about it. I posted online, anonymously at first. I said, there will be 3 signs before the 3 days of darkness. A withdrawal of light, natural and spiritual. A cracking of voices, division and deception, the sealing of homes, God's protection only for those who know him intimately. Some mocked. Some said I was crazy. A few reached out and asked questions, but most scrolled past. I realized what Jesus meant when he said that many would not listen. They were too distracted, too tired, too entertained, too cynical, but still a few listened. One night, as I sat in my room recovering, a young nurse who had been caring for me lingered longer than usual. She leaned close and whispered, "I saw the light around you when you came back. You weren't hallucinating. I believe you." I felt tears build in my eyes. She asked, "What do I do to be ready?" That was when I knew, even if one soul heard the message, it was worth it. I told her everything. The signs, the urgency, the need for spiritual surrender, not just religious formality. She cried. I cried. And we prayed together, right there in a sterile hospital room, as if it had become a holy sanctuary. The more I shared, the more I saw spiritual resistance. Every time I tried to post about the signs, strange glitches would occur. My account got flagged. Videos were taken down. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop, because the words of Jesus still echoed in my heart. The trumpet will not sound for those asleep in comfort, but for those awake in surrender. I realized this wasn't just about visions or prophecy. It was about the soul of humanity, about spiritual readiness. I didn't need to be a preacher or a prophet. I just had to be obedient, to carry the warning, to tell the world that time was shorter than we thought. As I prepared to leave the hospital, I packed not just my belongings, but the burden of what I had seen. I no longer saw the world the same way. I didn't hear news reports. I listened for the sound behind them. I didn't just see faces. I looked for light or shadows around people. Something had changed forever. Jesus didn't show me these signs to scare the world, but to wake it up. And the darkness, it was closer than we think. I wish I could tell you that after returning home, life went back to normal. But how could it? I was no longer the same person. The colors of this world seemed duller, yet the spiritual realm was more vivid than ever. I couldn't laugh at the things I used to laugh at. I couldn't ignore the noise that once seemed harmless. Every conversation, every moment felt weighted, like time itself had slowed down, holding its breath. I began watching the skies. I began listening to the silence between words. I began seeing shadows where light used to live. And then One night in early spring, the first sign began to manifest. It started subtly. The streetlights on my block began to flicker. Not the mechanical kind of flicker, but something stranger. The moon above looked muted, as if someone had drawn a veil across it. I heard neighbors grumbling about power surges and electrical issues, but in my spirit, I felt something whisper. The light is being withdrawn. Not just the light in the sky, but the light in people. It was like watching a slow fade across the faces of my friends, my family, even strangers on the bus. Eyes that once sparkled looked dull, tired, disconnected. Joy was evaporating without a sound. Hope seemed thin. And those who had mocked me, some began to dream. Nightmares of storms without wind, of voices screaming in a language they didn't know, of blackness swallowing the sky. They came back to me. They asked questions they used to laugh at. Is this what you meant? I didn't answer right away. I simply said, watch for the voices next. Because that was the second sign Jesus had shown me, the cracking of voices. It happened not long after. News anchors began contradicting themselves. Politicians shouted with trembling voices. Even pastors began to divide. Churches split not just over doctrine, but over tone. One preached grace, another thundered judgment. One said peace and safety, the other said run and repent. And in households across the world, arguing broke out like wildfire. Sons against fathers, daughters against mothers, friends turning cold. Even within me, I felt the spiritual pressure increase. It was as if every demon assigned to silence us had been let loose, whispering seeds of doubt, division, and fear. I had to fight just to stay steady in prayer. I remembered what Jesus said in the vision. The voices will crack under pressure. Only those who know my voice will remain unshaken. I clung to that. And then one evening, the third sign came. I had just finished praying when I heard the words clear as day. Now is the hour to seal your home. I didn't fully understand what that meant until I began sensing something moving in the spirit over my neighborhood. I wasn't the only one. Believers around the world, some I'd never met, began posting online, emailing me, even calling out of the blue. They said they felt the same thing, a call to consecrate their homes, to seal them in prayer, to draw their families close. It wasn't panic. It was preparation. Jesus had shown me in the vision that before the 3 days of darkness, those who would be protected were those who had invited him to reign in their homes, not just with crosses on the wall, not just with Bible verses in the kitchen, but with living, breathing surrender, with repentance, with forgiveness, with humility. So that's what I did. I stood at every doorway of my small apartment and prayed aloud. I quoted Psalm 91. I anointed the windows with oil. I repented for every prideful thought. I let go of every grudge. I worshiped when I wanted to worry. I gave thanks when I wanted to tremble. And as I did, I felt something shift. It was as if heaven drew near again, not in vision, but in presence. A holy stillness covered me like a warm blanket. No light in the room changed, but the light inside me grew stronger. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because I knew the darkness was almost here. Not just the physical darkness that Jesus warned of, but the spiritual nightfall before his return. I sat by the window, staring at the quiet street below. Then I opened my notebook and wrote the last line of my journal, the same line I now share with you. He told me to warn them. He told me to prepare. The light is fading. The voices are cracking. The homes are being sealed. And after that, the night will come. I don't know the exact day the darkness will descend, but I know it's close. And I know we are not to fear, but to be ready. So I ask you, have you sealed your home? Have you prepared your heart? Have you surrendered your will? This isn't a story meant to entertain. It's a trumpet blast. And Jesus is calling us one last time to wake up before the night. Please, if you feel the Holy Spirit stirring your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. This may be the final hour, and your words may help someone else open their eyes. Comment, I will be ready if you're sealing your home. Let the world hear your voice before it cracks under the weight of silence.